It's another edition of WRAL Triangle 2. He's Pat Welter. I'm Mark Bergin. Welcome in. North Carolina takes on UNC Charlotte on the road on Saturday. And Pat, I want to start here. Who starts for the Tar Heels on Saturday?
Well, Bill Belichick didn't tell us, so we officially do not know. And I think it's a question of who will start versus who should start. I think if Gio Lopez is healthy to go, he will start. And I think questions are legitimately being asked about as to whether was he pulled for the injury or was he pulled for the performance and then went to the locker room to check on an injury. Regardless, I think the play that he had in that game up to the point where he was taken out in the third quarter warranted Max Johnson getting a shot. Now, if he's legitimately injured, Max Johnson's going to get another shot here. And I thought he played pretty well in relief, but I think the most concerning thing for me right now, Mark, is at least through one game, Carolina looks like they might be in one of those classic have two QBs, you don't have one situation.
The two lefties. I thought Johnson played well on his drive. He goes 6 of 7, leads the Tar Heels down. UNC looked good on its first two drives of the game. Gio Lopez marches them right down the field. Only 10 pass attempts. I think we need a bigger sample size here.
Agreed.
But this is where I say follow the money. And this is something that we're going to do on Monday after the game, where we've got a full investigative report of all of the money that UNC is allocating to Bill Belichick, the coaching staff, and all of that. I say follow the money because of reportedly what Gio Lopez is making to transfer from South Alabama to UNC. So if he is healthy, I think you follow the money and you say you're allocating, if it's roughly $2 million a year, we don't know the exact figure, but you follow the money and you see what UNC is allocating for Lopez to be the starter. You need a bigger sample. I think you've got Johnson ready, though, because in relief, I thought he looked okay. But at that point, the game was so far lost against TCU. Does it really even mean anything?
I guess at a minimum, let's pour one out for the story. Like, just for the story for Max Johnson. Like,
absolutely.
Even if this is the end of his college football career, potentially his playing career, he at least had this moment for a guy that broke his leg in the opener last season, had, I believe, 5 surgeries, spent 9 days in the hospital. I mean, this is a guy that wasn't sure if he was ever going to play football again. So for him to get that moment, go out there, throw a touchdown to his brother, that was probably the one positive that came out of the disaster that was TCU and UNC. And regardless of who plays quarterback in this game, like, their issues were so much bigger than that. Like, it starts there, like, because the offense was inept or just stuck in neutral for so much of that game, but it goes so much beyond that. I mean, you've got the stats right in front of you. They couldn't run the ball either.
50 yards rushing, 542 yards allowed as a defense, 1 of 10 on third down. If TCU doesn't play with tempo as well, TCU won time of possession, even though they want to go really fast. Still had the ball for 32 minutes. If you go up against a team that wants to control time of possession, that wants to win the takeaway battle, I think in the style that UNC ideally wants to play, the Tar Heels would have been... The defense, to me, looked tired, looked gassed at times because they get stuck on the field. But that TOP, the time of possession, 32 minutes for TCU, against other styles of play, if your defense is stuck on the field for 35 minutes in a game, 40 minutes in a game, it's not a recipe for success. So the offense couldn't stay on the field. The defense couldn't get off of the field.
Yeah.
And that's why you get the result that you do, a 48-14 finish in the opener against TCU.
No, I think that's a great point. Like, to me, watching the game, it felt like there was a disconnect between Belichick's game plan and his team's personnel and TCU's personnel and just how college football works. Like, this is not the NFL where totals are lower, scoring is higher in college. Obviously, you have much less controlled variables just among your players due to their ages and the distractions that come with it. And the idea that they came into this game looking like they wanted to, ironically now to say this, not beat themselves, control time of possession, run the ball, limit the possessions, and they get out there, well, you can only do that, A, if you don't beat yourself. And what do? They throw a pick six. They throw a fumble six. They have another fumble. They had several other fumbles that ended up getting overturned.
Bad snaps, too.
Bad snaps. So literally that game plan does not work at all. And then TCU ended up lighting up a tired defense. So I don't know if that's maybe Belichick now is going to take okay, now he feels like he knows his personnel better. Like, that was one of the things he talked about at his press conference this week. Is like, okay, we've seen these guys now. We need to do a better job of putting them in a position to succeed. My question is, what have you been doing all offseason? Because that looked like the antithesis of a Bill Belichick coach team in the opener.
I'm with you in terms of the fundamentals, but it does not surprise me when you talk about what does a Freddie Kitchens offense look like. And Freddie Kitchens, the offensive coordinator, has NFL experience, but when he's been in the NFL, he's been a running backs coach, he's been an offensive coordinator. The 2019 season, he was the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. His style of offenses want to run the ball more than they want to pass the ball. Good, bad, or indifferent, Pat, to where that is something I would expect to continue to see this offense run it more than it passes it, just given what his history is as a coach.
No, and I think that's fair, and I wonder, do they have the personnel to do it, right? Because like they had, A, injuries at the center position, which set them back. B, there's no Omarion Hampton coming through that door, and they trotted out Caleb Hood as the starter. Caleb Hood's been on this team for years. Like, that's one of the funny things, too. Like, UNC brought in all these transfers, all these guys, and who ended up like being the keys to the offense? It was the very few Mac Brown holdovers. Caleb Hood, Jordan Shipp, and Max Johnson ended up finishing the game at quarterback, not to mention throwing the touchdown pass to Jake Johnson. Caleb Hood, the other guy, scored the touchdown. So I think that's an interesting note. And yeah, I just wonder, like, clearly, like, what they thought this team could be coming out of camp to what they are was a massive disconnect. So I came out of that opener, like, all the little red flags we'd seen since Belichick got hired in December that seemed to kind of have calmed down as UNC kind of had executed this focus on football campaign in the wake of Jordan Hudson. Like, to me, like, all those red flags are back on the table, at least till we see how they perform against Charlotte.
So when you're there Saturday night covering this game, Pat, what are the things that you need to see for UNC to have success and to come out with Bill Belichick's first win as head coach of the Tar Heels?
Look, they're playing an American Athletic Conference team in Charlotte that has not, right, been a historic power, to put things politely. They need to dominate this game. They're an ACC football team with the greatest coach of all time, with supposedly a pretty good transfer portal class that, by at least the 24/7 Sports rankings going into the season. Like, they need to control this game a little bit. Like, I know it's week 2, but, like, at a certain point, your talent should be able to weigh out. Your coaching should be able to elevate that talent. I know he's got 70 new players. I know it's his second game as a college coach, but, like, you're playing Charlotte. You should dominate the football game. Like, they shouldn't come out of this. Like, if they come out of this one in a close game that's even close for this in the second half, like, I'm going to continue to be concerned.
And that was the thing against TCU. It's not that they lost. I don't know if anyone really expected UNC to win unless you were just a huge Tar Heels fan. It's the way that they lost. And this is maybe the biggest question I have for this podcast here, Pat, is what happens if UNC loses on Saturday night? And that is something where, okay, it's one thing to lose to TCU where they've got a veteran quarterback who probably has an NFL future, who's thrown for 4,000 yards. If you lose on the road to Charlotte, if you think Monday's opener was bad against a pretty formidable TCU team, against Charlotte, man.
There will be blood in the water and the sharks will come.
Yeah.
To quote Iron Man 2, one of my favorite movie quotes, something I think about often because as much as everyone lifted up Bill Belichick and the hype and ESPN was all on board, obviously our station, every media outlet in the country was trying to cover or get a piece of this pie. People are going to be feasting on the downfall. Like, this is classic American media 101. We prop you up, and then we love to bring you down. And if they fall to Charlotte, man, the teeth are going to be out. And they should be because, like I said, there were red flags about this from the beginning. How did things end in New England? Not well. Post Tom Brady, things did not go good. The staff decisions in New England, very questionable. I mean, there was that point where he had Matt Patricia and Joe Judge as like co-offensive coordinators with a young quarterback and Mac Jones. And then he comes here and brings together a staff full of like his sons, Matt Lombardi, who's Mike Lombardi's son, a coordinator in Freddie Kitchens that doesn't have a lot of, it isn't like the next up-and-coming hot shot at offensive coordinator, that's for sure. So, like, all these questions are on the table, and everything you thought was a win if they lose this game is now on the table.
You mentioned the coaching staff. I think about, too, the player evaluation, and I don't mean to shortchange any of the players that are on this roster, but not to relitigate everything that happened in New England, but that wasn't exactly stellar for the last, let's say, 5 years of his run there, because he was the general manager of the Patriots as well. So that's something to think about. If UNC loses, in my ideal world, Pat, if I have carte blanche on this, give me Mac Brown on the ESPN set talking about this game. God. Like, give me him back in his analyst role of what I don't need to hear from Belichick after the game. I don't need to hear from any of the players, any of the opposing team. Just give me Mac Brown on the set at ESPN. I would honestly love to know his thoughts of what went on in game one, but depending on what happens Saturday night, that is my ideal world, Pat Welter.
I could just imagine Mac up there just kind of killing him with kindness, just being like, hey, that Bill Belichick, he's a great football coach, but, it's tough to go in there. College football's crazy these days. You never know what's going to happen on Saturdays. I kind of was imagining Mac, like how he would have handled the post-game press conference, because he would have had some spin coming out of that. Bill did not really. Like, he kind of owned it, like, we need to be better in every facet of the game. TCU was better. We'll get better. Didn't offer a lot of substance, but at least owned it, at least wore it. And I think what you got to ask yourselves, if they lose this game, well, that's certainly not what you signed up for if you're UNC, right? Like, you had Mac Brown, who, at least with him, he treated people kindly. Now, Bill, to his credit, has been courteous with the media. The things I've heard behind the scenes is that, things are a little bit gruff with how the Bill Belichick staff treats people and even some of their own players from sources I've talked to. And with Mac Brown, treated people well, treated the parents well, treated the media well, was well-liked. His team was fun to watch. That was not fun to watch on Monday. And, they blew some big games and were embarrassed in some spots. But, again, like, when you had all those other positives, like, you were at least in for it. So if this gets ugly and it's also not fun and people aren't necessarily being treated well, again, like you have to wonder, what are we doing here?
And it goes back to follow the money, Pat. When they're
they
paying him $10 million a year, not to mention, I see something this week with Lombardi's contract, the general manager. He's making $1.5 million per year, and that's twice the amount, or almost twice the amount, is what that same general manager is making at Alabama. So it's like, if you're paying a premium, you expect premium results, and that's the name of the game. That's how you're judged in this business, in the sports world, of are you winning or losing? And at least after week one, Pat, you said it yourself. I'm not going to overreact over week one, but
I feel like I am.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
No, and it's understandable with what happened with the opener of the TCU. We'll see what happens Saturday night. Like, it's.
I mean, I want to say, like, I obviously am coming off negative, and I want to say, like, I want this to work. Right? Like, this is not me coming from this at a standpoint like I'm rooting for this not to work. Like, I want this to work. When he was hired, I was skeptical. After some of the Jordan Hudson saga and just kind of appeared to be some lack of judgment from Bill to begin, I was very skeptical. And then as kind of things wore on in the offseason, I started to buy in a little bit more, like hearing the players' accounts of, like, the individual coaching they were getting from Bill Belichick, talking to some recruits and hearing kind of the same kind of thing. Now, I heard some mixed results from some parent sources that I had on how things were being run behind the scenes and how their sons were, handling the coaching and what things were like. At a minimum, I think behind the scenes, things were very hard, which was probably a good thing, right? Like, this team needed to toughen up. Like, they've talked a lot about their conditioning, how difficult that was, how that brought them together. I think that's probably a good thing. It seemed like the discipline was more buttoned up than it was on Mac Brown. That was something they needed as well. So I started to kind of buy in. And then when you see this, you start to wonder if some of those things we thought behind the scenes that I'd heard from sources or that we just observed through his own behavior, you just kind of wonder, like, how locked in. And on top of this, a 73-year-old guy is, not just him, but his staff as well. Because to me, that is so much of college football, is your staff. Because this thing is too big of a machine for one man to run on his own.
I want to see where they're at after Saturday, but really, I told you this before the start of the season here on this podcast, Pat, is where are you at going into the Clemson game, where you've got the 4-game sample size? So you got Charlotte Saturday, the next week Richmond, the week after that UCF, And then where are you at going into that Clemson game? For Belichick's sake and for this program's sake, you would hope you get back to 3-1, at the worst 2-2.
Yes.
Because anything worse than that, Pat.
And then it could just be like an absolute steamroll. That stadium empties out, and let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
Let's not speak it into reality. But you worry, like when you've only had one game to look at, it is really impossible not to overreact. And when it looked as bad as it did, again, like it's hard not to overreact. But I'm trying to tell myself, Belichick's teams finish better than they start, and that is still on the table here. 72 players, as we've said 100 times.
Prime time too, in being the only game on Labor Day night as well, I think further puts the microscope on you a little bit. Anything else, UNC Charlotte, before we keep this rolling here?
Yeah, I think the last note is the spread, and this is an interesting one, and it speaks to what we're talking about, that everyone is really shook by the result. Biggest line move of the week. Opened UNC minus 21.5. I checked it this morning. It is down to 13.5. Huge, huge move.
Wow.
Massive. And clearly the line on Monday was wrong because UNC was a 3.5-point underdog. They get absolutely destroyed by TCU. And now nobody knows what to do. And I honestly, looking at that, like you move it that much, my gut, it tells me to probably take UNC, especially if you're going to let me get that 14 being a win. But I'm staying away until I know more about this team. I'm probably just letting it let you deal with that.
You're in my mind, which is a dangerous place to be because I was wondering that. So that is good info there. You want to go to State, Virginia next, Pat?
Yeah.
So this is not an ACC game, even though these are two ACC teams.
Ones.
Yeah. Some good news for the Wolfpack. Wide receiver Noah Rogers left the opener against ECU. He is cleared. He is good to go. And this is two teams that haven't played in 2 seasons, Pat. So if NC State wants to get right, this is a game that you got to win at home. They're a 3-point favorite at Carter Finley Stadium on Saturday. But I'm a little bit petty. I did notice this. They get the ESPN2 game, and Duke, Illinois gets ESPN. They get the main channel. But something I noticed.
Well, that probably speaks more to Illinois being the number 11 team in the country than it does to Duke or either of these two teams. But I still think in the Triangle area, as big as the Duke-Illinois game is for Duke's program, I mean, NC State's the one that has the fan base around here. This is the biggest fan base around here. This is the biggest game for our region in that regard. And it's a big one for NC State. And I think it's funny, like everything's relative, right? The grass is always greener and all that. After NC State beat ECU, a team they had lost to in the Military Bowl, a lot of Wolfpack fans were walking around acting like they lost because they were just so upset at seeing a lot of kind of the same, Groundhog Day all over again traits of a Dave Doran team that gets up to a lead, really gets conservative, nearly trickles it away, isn't aggressive. All those things can be true. But then when you go out and see what Bill Belichick does, completely embarrasses themselves, and UNC's all of a sudden, scrambling. NC State's like, well, we've had Dave Doran for 13 years. It's not great, but it ain't that bad either, I guess. And they got a real chance to go 2-0 here against a Virginia team that is much improved. I think we could say that from how they destroyed Coastal Carolina in week 1. So this is an interesting matchup. I'm not entirely sure what to expect, but it's a chance for us to see, I think, maybe how good NC State really is. And I think there's a chance they're a pretty good team.
2 ties I'm looking at. So Chandler Morris was a teammate of cornerback Brian Nelson II. They both played last season at North Texas. So note there, and I know Brian Nelson spoke with reporters earlier this week. And then Virginia offensive coordinator Desmond Kitchings. He held several coaching positions with the Wolfpack from 2012 to 2019. So there's a little bit of familiarity there when it comes from NC State standpoint.
And then you go back, like these teams you said that hadn't played each other in 2 years. So that would mean the last time they played was at Virginia, which is what I like to call the bleep be happy we won game. This podcast has to stay family friendly, so I'll self-edit myself. So to refresh people who don't remember, last time these two played, it was a nail-biter. Virginia was not good. NC State was supposed to be very good with the Brennan Armstrong year, the Robert and I. They're supposed to open up the offense, and they come out and they kind of struggle offensively to start the year, nearly lose to a Virginia team playing, I think, a true freshman quarterback at the time. And, Dave Doran comes back out in the press conference and says,
Be happy we won.
Be happy we won, which I think was kind of the message after the ECU game as well. And you know what? When you see North Carolina, you should be happy that you won. So I think that's an interesting storyline. And here's another one for you. Remember I went to Pigskin Preview back a couple weeks ago where all the coaches come to speak. It's kind of a fundraising event.
Yes,
so
yes.
You had Bill Belichick, who was the main event. You had Dave Doran. You had Manny Diaz. You had the offensive coordinator show up in relief of Harrell for ECU. You also had Trey Oliver at NC Central. And, the coaches got a little bit honest on the mic, and he comes out and he just drops a bombshell of a story. He comes out, he says that last season, a Virginia Tech coach was on their sideline tampering with their running back. Well, he goes, that running back ultimately went to the University of Virginia, and I hope that Virginia beats the snot out of Virginia Tech. Well, if you tie the strings together here, that running back would have to be Jamari Taylor, who was an NC Central transfer, who went to Virginia, and he is now on this team. He's going to play against the Wolfpack, and he had a big opening week for Virginia. So just another fun little triangle tie here in these games where it never seems to end.
This is why I value your perspective, Pat, because a lot of this stuff, your boots on the ground, and you can give just that perspective of physically being in the room.
Sure.
Wow. Okay. So Wolfpack defense have their hands full. I thought they played the first 28 minutes of the opener really well against ECU. For the first 28 minutes of the game, it's like maybe this is NC State's year, and then the end of the game just barely hanging on. So we'll see. I mean, you try not to draw too many conclusions from one game, but that's what we're limited to right now. But at home, Dave Doran spoke about the importance of protecting home turf, playing at home, protecting Carter Finley Stadium and everything too. So you're a 3-point favorite. You got to take care of business, I would imagine. Let's go to Duke, Illinois, if you're ready. Illinois, number 11, and to me, this signals because Duke's gotten some votes in the AP Top 25. If Duke pulls off the upset, I do expect the Blue Devils to be ranked the following Monday, the following week. So that, to me, that writing writes itself. Getting the ESPN treatment right at noon. But to me, this is where, going back to follow the money, Darian Mensah, if he can essentially do what he did against Elon. You look at that final stat line. If you do that against an Illinois team, perhaps Duke could pull off the upset. Yeah,
as much as UNC did not live up to the hype, I would say that Duke and Darian Mensah did in their opener. Maybe I'm just seeing things through light blue goggles right now, but Darian Mensah actually reminded me a little bit of Drake May in just his kind of footwork, light on his feet, always seems to make the right read, athletic, mobile, not necessarily like the strongest arm in the world, but like really seems to give the appropriate amount of touch on all of his throws. I loved it. I thought it was great. A little bit of a slow start versus Elon. Very strong finish. I mean, his stat line was ridiculous. It was like 27-34, 389 yards, 3 touchdowns. Most of that came in the second half. But, yeah, I'm excited. This is a big opportunity for Duke and for Manny Diaz.
They're going to need a faster start, to me. That's going to be key because if you have a slower start like against Elon, against a team like Illinois, that will cost you. So, like, that to me, where you look at the final score and it was like, man, Duke blew Elon out. That was a one-score game later into the second half than you would have imagined. And remember, that was going on at the same time as the NC State game. So, like, we're trying our best to cover and watch all of this going on. But I think the fast start is going to be key against Illinois because if they do that again of the slower start that Duke had against Elon, against better competition, it's not going to cut it, Pat.
I'm waiting to be sold completely on Illinois, right? Like, they went 10-3 last season. A lot of their preseason ranking is due to that. Obviously, the coach is back, Brett Bielema. The quarterback is back. So when you have those kind of things, like I'm an AP voter for the first time this season, I don't have them as high. Like I have them a little bit lower. It's a little bit wait and see for me with them. So we're going to find out if this team's worthy of this ranking. Luke Altmaier is their quarterback, 22-6 TD to interception ratio last year. Second year as a starter for them. So it's an interesting team. Brett Bielema has done a good job there. Like that's kind of an example of what happens if you stick with a coach. Like 5-7, 8-5, 5-7, 10-3. Now they're number 11 in the country. Like, as much as we're ready to run Bill Belichick out of town here, it does take a little bit sometimes to get these college programs running, and Illinois is about as good as hot as they've been.
The Illini have not been ranked this high in the AP Top 25 since 2008, so it's a great point. 5-game winning streak dates back to last season, so how much of that is this season? So I think that's totally fair with where you've got them ranked in your rankings, Pat, because how much carryover there is from one season to another. To me, each season stands on its own.
Diaz was good in these games last year. He just didn't win them. Like, he was 0-3 versus ranked opponents. Miami game, could have won. That's one, like, talk about, like, crazy betting spreads. Like, they were like a double-digit dog in that game. We're up double digits, I believe, in the third quarter against Cam Ward in Miami, and then didn't cover the spread. Like a double-digit spread. Just like kind of a crazy result. And then the other one, I believe, was SMU, which was a nail-biter in Durham, and then Ole Miss in the bowl game. In that point, you know, obviously the bowl game, you kind of take it for what it is. Different guys playing, different guys out. So, you know, in that 9-4 season, as good as it was for Diaz in year one, didn't beat a ranked team. And one of the things that he said this week that really stood out to me was, like, the most important thing we could do is play within our character. Like, they can win this game. I kind of think they will, but they have to play up to their standard, play up to their best. And sometimes that's hard to do when a big ranked team's coming to town and it's week 2.
Any final thoughts here, Pat, before we sign off? You usually have some weekend wisdom for the people.
I'm just trying to think of what I'm going to say if UNC and Bill Belichick lose to Charlotte. I mean, either way, this Bill Belichick thing is going to be fun, right? Because if they're spectacularly bad, it's going to be like an expose on what's going wrong, why it went wrong, this huge investment the Tar Heels made in it, how they handle it, if they feel like they need to part ways or if he parts ways on his own. If there's a spectacular turnaround, I'll be willing to eat all my words. If they blow out Charlotte this week and maybe Max Johnson starts and is fantastic, and you're like, wow, they found their Tom Brady. Here we go. History repeating all over again. Like, I guess the one thing you don't want it to be is in the middle where they're just like 7-6 or 5-7 or whatever it would be. But again, to the Brett Bielema point, you know, you give a guy time, maybe he can build this into something. They've got, I think, the number 17th recruiting class coming in for next year. He seems to be trying to build it for a long-term thing. But, man, the way things are going, I wonder how long-term anything like that can last.
Check out Pat Welter's coverage Saturday. He'll be in Charlotte with Brian Murphy. And then on Monday as well, Pat, we've got an Investigates piece of all the millions of dollars with the Belichick era at UNC, following the money in the money trail of the investment of bringing Bill Belichick to Chapel Hill. I think a lot of listeners and viewers will enjoy watching that. But, Pat, I want to thank you for your time. Absolutely. And looking forward to your coverage on Saturday.
Buckle up, baby. We only got one game in. It's already electric here in the Triangle.
Absolutely. He's Pat Welter. I'm Mark Bergin. Thanks for watching and listening to WRAL Triangle 2. If you haven't already, I know what you're doing. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button as well on YouTube. Thanks so much, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Until then, take care. So long, everyone.